that brings us to our mailbag question of the day from SG Bunch of Numbers. Always get great questions from him. Very simple. If the Flyers win the draft lottery, who should they take with the second pick? Charlie, you've been doing this. You've been doing this research. I've been reading some different mock drafts and stuff. It looks like the pretty much consensus number 2. It's kind of funny. It's Demidov.
Yeah. So
is that who? Like, is he?
So here's
is he the absolute definite number 2?
Okay. So here's my thing. I actually,
Demidov, I guess
it's Demidov. I would be very surprised if Demidov actually goes number 2, because he is exactly the type of player that people like us love. But I think, like, I am convinced the defenseman's probably going to go 2, because this is the NHL. And there's the Russia factor. And there's the fact that Demidov has the same scouting concern that Michkov did. Because it wasn't just the Russia factor that had Michkov slip. Even if there was no geopolitical mess in Russia or whatever, I don't know if Michkov would have went 2. I think he very well might have went behind Fantilli and Carlson. I think he would have went 4. Probably 4. I think he would have went over Will Smith. But I am uncertain that he would have went 2 or 3, because there's always scouts, understandably, worry about guys who aren't that big and also aren't elite skaters. And Michkov, that's Michkov. I'm not saying Michkov's a bad skater, but he's not a burner, and he's kind of small. Demidov is the same thing. He's not huge, and he's not a burner. He's very, very good on his edges, but he's not an elite skater. And those guys tend not to go number 2. So I think there's a good chance Demidov might end up as the number 2 on a lot of public boards. I would be surprised. I think he'll go in the top 5 or 6, but I would be surprised if he goes 2. Now, to answer the question, though, yeah, Demidov is my guy. I am not done doing all my tape study, but he is a really exciting prospect. And I watch him and I see a guy out of everybody who I think has the best chance of being a superstar. Like Celebrini is going to be. I would be shocked if he's not. Mm-hmm. He just checks so many boxes. He does so many things well. He kind of, you watch him play and he's sort of reminiscent of like a running back, where he kind of like jukes players. Like he attacks the middle of the ice so well. Like he's gonna rule. Celebrini's awesome. Demidov is really exciting to me, and he would be my ideal choice at 2 if the Flyers take him. The thing that I love about Demidov, in theory, and again, I don't want to get everybody too excited because they're probably not going to win the lottery. And if they do win the lottery, there's also a pretty good chance they don't take Demidov. But what excites me about Demidov is I think Michkov and Demidov styles aren't totally dissimilar, which makes sense. I mean, they're coming from the same country. There's a certain way that guys develop and things that got prioritized in the developmental process in certain countries. So it doesn't shock me that their games aren't completely dissimilar. But I think the key difference is that Michkov, and we talked about this last week, Michkov, he can pass. He's got great vision. He's got great hands. He's got all that stuff. But at his core, he wants to score goals. Demidov he can score goals. He's got a good shot. He's got great hockey sense. He can put himself in places to score. But at his core, he's a playmaker. And the idea of putting, Michkov on the right, Demidov on the left, stick them on the same line, and let Demidov feed Michkov for 50 goals a year for the next decade, it's extremely attractive to me. So Demidov is my preference right now at number 2 if the Flyers were to jump up in the lottery.
I always think, even if there's all these good defensemen, if it's like there's one guy though who has legit superstar potential, and even if he's a Russian winger, it's like, well, we're kind of set at right wing and we're already waiting on one high-end Russian guy. Like, do we need to double down on this? My answer to that is yes. Always take the guy with the star potential. And I always think of, did Tampa Bay need Jonathan Drouin? Probably not. And did Jonathan Drouin work out? No. But since he had that superstar pedigree going back to when he was drafted, you got something you really needed for him when it was time to move a prospect for a right now player. And that's what they did with Sergachev. So that's that. But say the Flyers, we know, they might be focusing a little bit on defensemen in this draft. They think centers are next year. Like if they want to draft their center, it's next season probably.
Fair.
So let's say they go for a defenseman. Who at 2?
Well,
we're looking at this in the world where the 5 point whatever % chance comes through, and the Flyers pick second in this draft. Is there one defenseman who really stands out to you?
Well, so to me, yes, there is one guy I like more than the others. I don't know if that's the guy who they will take. It seems like scouts really, really love Lev Shinov. He's the guy who plays for Michigan State. Put up really good numbers at Michigan State, 35 points in 38 games as a defenseman, as a freshman in his draft year. And I get it.
This guy, a Belarusian NCAA player?
Yeah, he came over.
This is insane.
Yeah, I get it. He's
I like
big.
him
He's
a lot.
big. He's aggressive. He can skate well. He's just constantly activating. So I get it. I think he's a guy who you watch and you can dream on. I personally would not take him. My favorite defenseman in this draft is Zeev Buium, who is the Denver guy, the guy who was one of the, if not the best player on the Denver team that just won the national championship, that upset the 2 Boston teams. I see a guy who I don't know if there's anything he's bad at. You watch tape on him, and like I watch tape on Lev Shinov, and I see a guy who is raw and needs a lot of work. And I'm not saying Buium doesn't need work, because all these guys need some work, but it's really hard for me to pick out any flaws in Buium's game. And he's maybe not the best technical skater, but he's still a good skater. He doesn't the skating doesn't look great, but he's quick. He's got the playmaking ability. I really like Buium. So if I were the Flyers, I would take him, knowing Jonesy's love of size, especially on the back end. Guys like Lev Shinov and then Saleyev. I would suspect that those 2 guys would be higher in their estimation than Buium. But for me, I think Buium is the best defenseman in this draft.
Saleyev is obviously, I don't know, you just told me about a Belarusian kid playing in the NCAA, and I kind of love that. But Anton Saleyev is 6'7", 207. He turned 18 on April 11th. This is a young guy, and he is freaking gantic.
He's huge. You can like the upside is enormous with him. It's just that like he might not hit it. I look, if the Flyers ended up with Saleyev, I would be perfectly fine, because number 1, upside's huge. Number 2, they actually have a coach in Brad Shaw who I would trust to develop him properly. It's just like I watch Buium and I see a guy who, not necessarily a finished product, but I don't have to dream on him. He's already freaking awesome. Whereas guys like Lev Shinov and Saleyev, you have to envision what they could become rather than be like, yo, this guy's already awesome.
No, he just had 50 points in 42 games as a freshman and led his team to a national title. Yeah. He's already real good.
Yeah.
It's not a projection. It's like if he just continues on this path, he's awesome.
So he's my favorite of the defensemen. But again, like my viewpoint with this top tier is that
it's basically all
none of these guys I would be mad about. Like truthfully, I mean, like I'm not super duper high on Lev Shinov. I don't fully buy into the decision making, but I love the physical tools, and I think you could mold him into a number 1. Absolutely. Like Saleyev, same thing. Like I don't think he's there yet. I think he is a guy where he's not going to be what he's going to ultimately become for another 3-4 years. But what he could ultimately become could be the Russian Victor Hedman, which is fucking awesome.
I saw Chara play in the AHL, and it took him a while, man. Like, I saw him get laid the fuck out Lindros style by John Druce, because, listen, when you're that big, sometimes you skate with your head down. The puck's real far away. You need to find it. Like, it takes a while, especially for dudes that big. That's what we were told about Sam Moran for so long. It's just like, oh, man, if it's true, though, if it comes true,
real,
we have a monster. We have a dude who eats people. Like, I want that so bad. But we'll see how it all works out.
I think
chances are they're picking 12th.
Chances are. The 2 guys who I am the most iffy on, and again, like, I don't dislike them, but they're the 2 guys that I'm probably the lowest on out of that tier. First guy, it has less to do with him, and it more has to do with the Flyers and their mix. It's not that I don't like Zane Parekh. I do. I think he's an unbelievably talented player with the puck, and he absolutely has star potential. It's just like they kind of already have a guy like that in Drysdale, who's already a right hand. Like Parekh would be Drysdale, except they already have Drysdale. Now maybe he's a better Drysdale, but I don't know if you need two of them. Like I'm just iffy on whether that's a good use of resources to get another smallish right-handed shooting defenseman who will need to play the same role if he hits that Drysdale presumably will play if he hits. So a little iffy on that pick just in terms of allocation of resources. And the other guy, who again I also like, is Konsta Helenius. And his big thing, like on some level, as a center, Flyers need a center. If he slips a 12, I'm not going to be crying. I don't know if I see star potential in him. I watch him, and I'll go into this a little bit more, later in the month when I start doing these videos. I watch Helenius, and I see this is like I like him. I like watching him play. I see Joel Farabee if Joel Farabee could play center, and that's good. Like he'll be a darn good player.
Well, that's good.
I just don't know if I want center version of Joel Farabee when you could potentially get guy who could be an 80, 90 point player. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't know if he has the ceiling for me to want, like, given what the Flyers need, which is high-end talent. I don't know if I see him as truly high-end. I see him as really good, and
solid.
I will really enjoy watching him play if he becomes a Philadelphia Flyer. Maybe he becomes a Couturier-esque 1C in terms of impact. I'd like to see them take a little bit of a bigger swing, and I'm not sure Helenius has the kind of upside that makes me want to give him a go. But if he's there, like, I don't dislike him. It's just I don't know if his upside matches. Like, I have concerns about Caden Lidstrom, but I think his upside is significantly higher than Helenius is. I mean, so even if I might enjoy watching Helenius more now, I watch Lidstrom and I'm like, oh, if he hits, like, shit, I mean, he could be like a legitimate star level 1C. I don't know if I see a star level 1C in Konsta Helenius.
I mean, Caden Lindstrom, that's an A-tier hockey name right there. That's a great, NHL
it's a great
franchise simulator.
Yeah.
We all silly like the mayor.